What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. I missed you guys over the last few days. I was MIA. I was handling some things behind the scenes, but I promise you guys, not only am I back, but I'm back for the long haul. I have a goal. I'm trying to upload every weekday for the next month, at least until the end of the draft. And there's just been so much stuff going on in the NFL, from JSN becoming the NFL's highest paid receiver ever. You have the Texans and the Steelers making big moves in free agency. We have a lot to get caught up with on tonight's episode. How good is Zay Flowers actually? Is he a true wide receiver one? The Chiefs, I was very shocked to see when I checked Hard Rock earlier that not only are they the favorites to win the AFC West despite finishing third place in the division last year, but they also are third in odds to win the AFC this year. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs are extremely overrated by people inside of Vegas and the NFL media. And in case you guys haven't had enough bad takes when it comes to this year's NFL draft, our brother Dan Orlovsky gave us the worst take of draft season up to this point, and I don't see anything else topping it. It's very shocking who he has as his QB1, and it's not Fernando Mendoza. The answer is really going to shock you. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in wherever you're watching. Shout out to Kazir Gordon, who's tapped in with us on the chat. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, shout out to you. Wherever you're watching, if you live, eat, breathe, and die football, you have come to the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you do not miss when we drop new content. We are not just a YouTube channel, by the way. For those of you guys who do not know, we are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our other ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms. If you enjoy the content, you want to support the grind, all we ask is that you give us a 5-star review. We just had one person give us a 5-star review a few days ago on Apple. Shout out to whoever that was. We now have 19 more 5-star reviews to go until we crack 100 5-star reviews. We're trying to reach that goal by the end of April. So go ahead, give us a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, the links are down in the description below. And let's dive into it. The Seattle Seahawks have made JSN the richest wide receiver in NFL history. They have agreed to a 4-year deal worth $168.6 million. 120 mil of that is going to be fully guaranteed. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba is now going to be making more money per season than Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at $42 million per year. The Seahawks, they had no choice but to reset the wide receiver market for JSN. Sure, it's a little bit insane that JSN is making more money than Jamar and Justin Jefferson, even though he is one of the best receivers in the game, but it's a little bit too early to say that he unquestionably is the best receiver in the NFL right now. But if we are going by last year, with the NFL being a what have you done for me lately business, you get paid off your recent performances, your recent production. And last year, statistically, you can make the argument that Jaxon Smith-Njigba was the best receiver in the NFL. He led the NFL in receiving yards. He had the 7th most receiving yards in the season. You also had a guy who won Offensive Player of the Year. So, sure, if we're going off the past 3 seasons, JSN doesn't hold a candlestick to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. But these contracts are not about your overall body of work. It's based off recency bias. And based off what JSN has done recently, he deserved to be the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history and in the NFL at the current moment. And the strange thing about any time these guys sign a record-breaking contract for their position, the next guy that's in line to get paid ends up exceeding them, and that is going to be Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is thanking JSN right now for the new contract he just signed with Seattle, since all it's going to do is make him the new highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. So if you don't think that JSN is better than Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and it's outrageous that he's making more money per season than them, well, buckle up, because Puka Nacua probably is going to be making at least $45 million per season. He could sign a $200 million deal over the next 4 seasons that pays him $50 million per. Puka Nacua and JSN are going to change the wide receiver market as far as the numbers that you're going to see these guys making yearly. You never thought that receivers would ever get paid as much as what they're getting right now, since receivers aren't as necessary as what you may think to winning a Super Bowl. We've seen the Ravens win a Super Bowl with Anquan Bolden, Torrey Smith at receiver. Patrick Mahomes went back-to-back as soon as the Chiefs got rid of Tyreek Hill. So you don't need to have an elite receiver to win a Super Bowl, but having an elite receiver does help you. It doesn't do anything but improve your chances. And since JSN statistically was the best receiver in the NFL last year, he deserves to get paid like it as well. Now, what Seattle had to sacrifice in order to keep JSN around long term is they had to lose Kenneth Walker to the Chiefs in free agency. They couldn't afford to pay him. Tariq Woolen, he also is gone as well. But you have to take some casualties along the way to continue to be a consistent Super Bowl contender, since certain players, certain positions are more valuable to your long-term success than guys like Tariq Woolen and Kenneth Walker. Great running backs come a dime a dozen. Running backs are the most easiest position in the league to replace. They have the shortest lifespan in the NFL. Kenneth Walker is a very good player, but he hasn't really been on the field that much these last couple of years for the Seahawks. He's often injured. He gets dinged up, and sometimes he can be very good, like how you saw in the Super Bowl, but he also can be a little bit hit or miss at times with his playing style. The Seahawks had to get JSN paid no matter how much he was asking for. They had to get this out of the way so they can focus their attention to extend another young superstar that they have in their roster, that being Devon Witherspoon, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And he, like JSN, probably is going to be the highest paid for his position. Even if you don't feel like JSN deserves to be the highest paid receiver in the league, he just was the beneficiary of a forever evolving wide receiver market. Receivers are going at an all-time high rate, since the demand for receivers has never been higher than what it is today. We all know it's a passing league. It's a quarterback-driven league. And for you to have success throwing the football, for your quarterback to have success, what does he need? Great receivers. So guys like JSN, when you come off a year when you have the 7th most receiving yards in NFL history, you're tied for top 5 in receptions, you're going to cash out on a year like this. Now, where JSN fall off, what is your definition of a fall off for JSN? If you're telling me he's going to fall off because he can't replicate the success last season, this season, then I don't really qualify that as a fall off, because 1,700 yards, anything around that ballpark, is very hard to repeat back-to-back years. But if you're telling me JSN gets 1,300, 1,200, 1,400 yards, I don't view that as a fall off. JSN you can't deny he's a top 5 receiver right now. He's one of the best route runners, has phenomenal hands, and the brother just showed out in every big game that the Seahawks played in last year. So when you're the offensive player of the year, you have a historic season, yeah, you're going to cash out on that and reset the market. That's just this new age in the NFL. Guys, they come off career high years and they cash out. The next person that's going to cash out is going to be Puka Nacua. And if JSN is making $168 million over 4 years, you got to think that the price tag that the Rams are going to have on Puka Nacua is going to be even larger than this one. It's so loosely defined what is an elite quarterback in the NFL. Because honestly, what qualifies a quarterback to be considered elite? It's no textbook definition, which is what I'm here to solve. I'm here to explain to you guys what I believe makes an elite quarterback in the NFL. Now, my criteria is of a bunch of things, not necessarily stats and performance, but more so your ability to elevate your team. Can you do more with less? Can you elevate your coaching staff? Can you overcome certain limitations that you may have to deal with? And that's the number one thing when it comes to evaluating and assessing if a quarterback is elite or not. Elite quarterbacks have to be able to overcome weak situations like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, for example, in 2022, when he took the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl, he didn't have a super team. Sure, he had 2 phenomenal receivers, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but he had the worst offensive line in the NFL that season. He was the most sacked quarterback to ever make it to the Super Bowl since the 70s, and his defense was okay, but it wasn't elite. But with Joe Burrow being an elite quarterback in 2022, he was able to lead the Bengals to the Super Bowl in spite of the limitations that they had on the offensive line. That's what an elite quarterback is supposed to do. If you're going to pay an elite quarterback 20-30% of your salary cap space, they have to be able to do a little bit more with less, since the money they're going to be getting paid, you're not going to be able to have to allocate to making sure that every single position around them is up to snuff. Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, they also have been able to win championships despite not having a great supporting cast. Not the best offensive lines, not the best receivers. Elite quarterbacks have the ability to just elevate the players around them, elevate the personnel that they have. The line isn't great. Even if the receivers aren't great, elite quarterbacks always find a way to get the most out of what they have around them and adapt their game to their supporting cast, to the current state of their team. Another thing that qualifies a quarterback for being elite is that elite quarterbacks, they are the system. You have system quarterbacks like Brock Purdy who are elevated by the scheme that they're in, the players around them. And then you got certain quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson who are the system. Elite quarterbacks give you elite production no matter who you have calling plays. No matter if you had Adam Gase, Nathaniel Hackett, the worst offensive coordinator in the league, calling plays for Lamar Jackson, he still will play at an MVP level, because elite quarterbacks make the guys calling the plays for them better than what they are. Peyton Manning got Adam Gase his first ever head coaching job, and Adam Gase sucked as a head coach. But if you are a coordinator that's attached to a successful quarterback, teams are going to want you to replicate that offense and see if you can develop another quarterback the same way you did with your previous one. Elite quarterbacks just make offensive coordinators look better than what they are. And if you are an average quarterback or above average QB like a Jalen Hurts, you're only going to be as good as the coordinator. When Jalen Hurts has had his best seasons in Philadelphia, he had Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. Both of those guys are currently head coaches right now. And when he lost those two guys, you saw his play kind of diminish over the last few years. That's the example of the difference between an elite quarterback and the above, slightly above average quarterback. Above average quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts are only as good as the guys calling the plays. Elite quarterbacks, it doesn't matter who's calling the plays because they can turn a bad play into a great play, which makes the offensive coordinator look better. And elite quarterbacks also consistently play at an MVP level. Not too often do you see an elite quarterback have an off game. Guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, hell, even Dak Prescott routinely put up MVP level numbers, even if their teams aren't the greatest, even if their coaching situations aren't the best, they still find ways to produce at a very high level. And I think that guys like Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, who some may feel are elite quarterbacks, they are a tier beneath elite since they don't have that same level of consistency. There are games when Brock Purdy looks very good, and there are other games when Brock Purdy has like 3-4 turnovers, and he's costing the 49ers, or he's making it more difficult for the 49ers to win. Elite quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow always play well enough to put their team in position to win big games, even if their supporting cast isn't good, even if their head coach makes some bad clock management decisions along the way, because elite quarterbacks can help you overcome mistakes if you're a head coach. They can help you overcome missing on certain positions in the draft or in free agency, because elite quarterbacks are your team. They are the system. There are certain quarterbacks that are just so good that when they're on the field, they make their team a playoff team. If you take Josh Allen off the Buffalo Bills, they probably don't even sniff 6-7 wins. Guys like Lamar Jackson, you see what happens when he's off the Ravens. They have to completely change their offense. They're a completely different team. Elite quarterback is the identity and the soul of their team, of their offense. System quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, they're only as good as the talent around them and the guys calling the plays. That's what separates elite quarterbacks from system quarterbacks. And there are only 7 true elite quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP, should have been a 3-time MVP. We know how good Josh Allen is. He's been carrying the Bills on his back for the past 2 years despite having nobody's at receiver. Joe Burrow would have won MVP 2 years ago if he actually had somewhat of a defense. You got Patrick Mahomes, who, even though his play has dropped off slightly over the last few years, he still is putting up very good numbers in spite of the offensive line kind of being up and down, the receivers not really being that great. Drake May is already an elite quarterback to me. He took the New England Patriots to the Super Bowl when they weren't even expected to win no more than 10 games, maybe be a first-round exit in the playoffs, second-round exit at best. Drake May far exceeded expectations last season, considering that he didn't have that good of a receiving core. Stephon Diggs was his best wideout at 30-something years old, coming off an ACL injury. He had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. The ground game was a little bit inconsistent. Drake May didn't have a God squad like how Jalen Hurts did when he won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. This is probably the least talented team to ever make it out of the AFC into a Super Bowl, and it was mostly due in part to how good Drake May played. So if you have the kind of season that Drake May just did on a young team where the expectations are pretty low and you end up taking them to the Super Bowl, yeah, you're an elite quarterback. Dak Prescott has always been an elite quarterback in my eyes. Sure, he doesn't play his best in the playoffs, but the thing with Dak Prescott is he's consistently giving you 30-plus touchdowns every year with multiple coordinators, multiple different head coaches. Dak Prescott, regardless who his offensive coordinator is, regardless who his head coach is, you consistently are going to get really good quarterback play out of him. And Dak Prescott is too good to not win a Super Bowl before he retires. If Dak Prescott was on any other competent franchise, not named the Dallas Cowboys, if you would have put him on the Packers, the Ravens, the Steelers, somebody like that, he would have already had a ring. Dak Prescott is good enough to win a Super Bowl. The problem is that the guy cutting his checks, Jerry Jones, is just so self-absorbed and has such a big ego that he doesn't put good enough teams on the field or give Dak Prescott good enough head coaches for him to be able to take the Cowboys the distance. And no matter how good of a quarterback you are, you can't win a Super Bowl if you don't have an elite head coach. And lastly, I got Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, the reigning league MVP. Obviously, his career has taken a positive trajectory upwards since he got traded to the Rams a few years ago. Even when he was in Detroit, he was always very underappreciated, always putting up very good numbers. And I feel it didn't take people seeing how good Matthew Stafford was outside of Detroit to realize just how much of an all-time talent Matthew Stafford truly is. One of the best pure throwers of the football, throws a very accurate deep ball, and one of the toughest quarterbacks in the league at the moment. So these are the 7 elite quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and overall what I define to be an elite quarterback. Before we move on, look, if you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. You don't want to miss the new content that we have dropping over these next couple of days. Man, we're going to be going live every day, Monday through Thursday. We're going to be talking the NFL draft. We're going to be recapping every team's free agency signings. We also talk college football as well. I know this is a little bit of a dead period of college football. The only thing really going is spring camp, but normally around May, June, that's when college football starts getting a little bit buzz again, or a little bit more buzz. So if you just love football and you love talking football 24/7, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you do not miss when we drop new content. What the Steelers have done in free agency quietly has made this a dark horse Super Bowl contender. It's been said for the past 2-3 years that the Steelers need to go ahead, rebuild, blow it all up, and start over since they haven't had success in the postseason in over a decade. And the thing with the Steelers rebuilding is that they already have quietly rebuilt over the past 4 or 5 years. They have rebuilt the offensive line. 4 out of 5 starters on the Steelers offensive line this year would have been guys that they selected in the draft over the past 3-4 years. You also have a lot of young, good players on defense, like Joey Porter Jr. You drafted a defensive tackle out of Oregon in the first round last draft that had a pretty good rookie season. You got guys like Nick Herbig, Alex Highsmith. So the Steelers have done a very good job of rebuilding through the draft, being able to make some very good free agency signings as well, to mix along with that young talent that they've drafted. I felt why the Steelers were so successful in free agency this year was because they fixed their 2 biggest problems on both offense and defense. We knew last season Aaron Rodgers was going to have his work cut out for him, throwing the DK Metcalf and a bunch of randos behind him. And when DK Metcalf got suspended near the end of the season, Aaron Rodgers' number 1 receiver wasn't even a receiver. It was Kenneth Gainwell. So you bring in Michael Pittman, who you pretty much give up a flat soda and a bag of chips to get and to trade with the Colts. You pair him up with DK Metcalf, you now have one of the most physical wide receiver duos in the league, and you got a way better group to throw the football to for Aaron Rodgers than what you had last year. Outside of DK Metcalf, the Steelers' second best receiver was Calvin Austin, who's like 5'8", 5'9". So with Michael Pittman, you got a guy who can win those 50-50 matchups. He can be a really good red zone threat, and he's going to help Aaron Rodgers have more success this year, pushing the football down the field. The Steelers also improved their rushing attack. Last year, the Steelers were 26 in rushing yards per game. And even though at times Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell had their moments, there still wasn't a lot of consistency. You reunite Rico Dowdle, signing him in free agency, bringing him back with Mike McCarthy, the guy who first brought him into the league, where he first kind of made a name for himself and got paid by the Carolina Panthers last year in free agency. He already knows Mike McCarthy's scheme. The thing with Rico Dowdle is he's one of the better all-around backs in the league. There's not a single flaw in his game. He's very good running the football, obviously, north and south. He gets in between the tackles. He can put his shoulder down, run you over. He has very good hands. Despite his skill set, normally you don't see a power back as good catching the football at the backfield as what Rico Dowdle is. And with him forming a very good 1-2 punch with Jaylen Warren, who kind of has a similar skill set, can do a bunch of different things, very good all around, even though he's not as good running in between the tackles as what Rico Dowdle is. He's not the power back that Rico Dowdle is. Jaylen Warren being a change of pace back, being more of that explosive big play back, gives the Steelers a complimentary running back room. You got two different backs with two different skill sets that, depending on which one you want to go with, they give you a different element to your ground game, or they just bring a different dynamic in the backfield. And the Steelers need that. Because now with Rico Dowdle, you pair him up with Jaylen Warren, you look at what you're bringing in at wide receiver, along with what you already had at tight end with Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. The Steelers have a very underrated offense. They got the O-line situated. They got playmakers at running back and at receiver. Now the question just comes down to who's going to be playing quarterback for Pittsburgh this season. And it looks like that clearly is going to be Aaron Rodgers. Despite Aaron Rodgers being 42 years old, this guy still is a very good quarterback. Considering how bad the supporting cast he had was last year, you can only expect for Aaron Rodgers to improve this year in Pittsburgh with him relinking up with Mike McCarthy, the guy who he had the majority of his success in this league with. And then you're giving him better receivers to throw the football to with a healthy offensive line and a reliable ground game. As long as Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and he comes back to play for the black and gold this year, the Steelers have as good as a chance as what they've had in the last 6-7 years to win a Super Bowl. The AFC is wide open this year. Sure, the Ravens and the Bills have better shots at winning it all than the Steelers, but I don't see the Steelers being any different from the Texans, the Jaguars, the Broncos, the Chargers. There are a bunch of emerging contenders in the AFC, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are easily one of those teams. Not only did they fix their biggest problems on offense, but they fixed their biggest problem on defense. They loaded up in the secondary. Last year, the Steelers secondary, not only was it not that good, it was old. You had a bunch of injuries. So you signed Jamel Dean in free agency, who has played the first part of his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Very good man-to-man press corner. He's going to be a good duo alongside of JPJ. Then you signed Jaquan Brisker in free agency, which probably is my favorite free agency signing by the Steelers. Jaquan Brisker is going to be a dog for the Steelers. Not only has he been very good against the run, but he's a ball hawk, and you can line him up several different positions along the defense, right? You want to put him in the slot. You want to use him as like a nickel or dime linebacker. You want to use him single high, too high. It doesn't really matter. There's just so much versatility that Jaquan Brisker is going to bring to the Steelers defense. And then you re-signed Asante Samuel Jr., who I thought should have got a lot more playing time than what he did last year. The only reason he got some significant PT when they signed him off the streets was due to the injury that James Pierre had suffered. So when Asante Samuel came in, you wasn't really expecting that much since he's been out of football for at least a year and a half. But when he was in for the Steelers, he made some good plays. He caught an interception. He had a few key pass breakups in some divisional games. You look at what the Steelers have done in free agency improving their offense, giving Aaron Rodgers more playmakers, loading up in the secondary on defense. With Aaron Rodgers coming back to the Steelers this year, this is a team that is a sneaky Super Bowl contender. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is old, but the Steelers have never been more talented than what they currently are right now. You keep saying the Steelers need to rebuild, yet they've already have been rebuilding quietly while nobody was taking notice for the past 3-4 years. And that's why, with the additions that the Steelers have made in free agency this year, with a healthy Aaron Rodgers coming back, they're as good as anybody, and they have as good as a shot as what they've ever had in recent memory to make some noise and maybe sneak into the AFC Championship. Now, the Steelers weren't the only team that was cooking in free agency. The Houston Texans, what they've done in free agency so far can easily win them the Super Bowl. Last year, the Texans had a defense that was good enough to win it all if the offense didn't F it up. Unfortunately, CJ Stroud effed it up. This year, though, they did everything humanly possible to make sure that CJ Stroud not only doesn't F up their chances of winning the Super Bowl, but they also beefed up the offensive line, which was the biggest issue that they had last year, which kind of was a reason for CJ Stroud being so up and down since he didn't have that much time to throw. He couldn't really be that comfortable in the pocket. So you signed offensive tackle Braden Smith from the Indianapolis Colts and former All-Pro offensive guard Wyatt Teller from the Browns in free agency. So you improved the right side of your offensive line. You also got pretty good depth at that position now with you re-signing Trent Brown. You bring back offensive guard Ed Ingram, who is probably your best offensive lineman last year. Then you traded for David Montgomery. You get him for pretty much nothing from the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery is a top 10 running back. You pair him up with Woody Marks. The ability to run the football wasn't there for the Texans as much as they wanted it to be. The offensive line didn't do their run game any favors. So now you have an improved offensive line with a better backfield. That's going to take more pressure off of CJ Stroud's shoulders. You're not going to have to ask him to do that much, and you're going to limit his opportunity to make mistakes. And really, when you are a team that has a defensive-minded head coach, you normally tend to be run first, run heavy oriented. That's what the Texans are going to want to be this year. And with the great ground game helping out a phenomenal defense, keeping these guys rested, keeping them off the field, giving them a lot of breaks, a lot of time to get rested. You're going to make the defense even more OP with you improving the ground game, with what you signed in free agency on the offensive line, the trade for David Montgomery. The Texans defense also got more OP by signing Reed Blankenship in free agency, which now cements this as the best secondary in the NFL. Whether you thought it was the Broncos or the Seahawks, there is no longer a debate over who is the no-fly zone in the league. That's the Houston Texans. You already had Derek Stingley, Kalen Bullock, Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petrie. Now you add Reed Blankenship, who's great against the run, solid in coverage, was a team leader for the Philadelphia Eagles over the past couple of years. The rich only get richer. And now you add Reed Blankenship, which improves your secondary and improves your defense overall, with the Texans upgrading their offensive line, signing Reed Blankenship, adding on to an already elite defense. CJ Stroud, all he has to be is average, and the Texans can win the Super Bowl. This is one of the best teams in the NFL from a talent standpoint. They don't have too many glaring weaknesses. They are pretty solid at every position. All they need is for CJ Stroud to not F it up like how he did last year, and the Texans could end up winning it all this year. Kyle Shanahan, when he was interviewed at the Super Bowl, he literally said that the Seahawks and the Texans had defenses so good that as long as the quarterback played good or the quarterback didn't turn the football over, they were good enough to win championships. And this year, the Texans loading up on the offensive line, improving their rushing attack with trading for David Montgomery. Let's not forget, Tank Dell is coming back. C.J. Stroud's number one partner in crime. C.J. Stroud is in as good as a situation as what he's been so far in his career with the Houston Texans. And I know with how bad he played in the playoffs, it's hard to have a lot of confidence in C.J. Stroud. But the Texans haven't necessarily given C.J. Stroud the best of situations. And I felt with how well he played his rookie season, it kind of made the expectations so high to the point that we kind of overrated how good C.J. Stroud truly is, since we keep judging him based off his rookie season. Based on what C.J. Stroud has done these past 2 seasons since, he's been a solid quarterback. He's not an elite quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. And you can win a Super Bowl with a guy like a C.J. Stroud. And with him having an elite defense, a great offensive line, he got his best friend back at receiver. This is the Texans' chance to break through and win it all this season. Because after this year, when you're going to have to re-sign some of the young guys on this defense that you drafted, you're not going to be able to keep everybody. Some guys are going to get massive paydays elsewhere. So you got to strike when the iron's hot. And it's very hard to maintain a defense as good as what the Texans have been for a very long stretch. Normally, defenses as good as the Texans only last for 2-3 years, and then after that, they slowly fall off, since it's hard to maintain elite defenses since there's so many moving parts, so many moving pieces. On offense, if you have a good quarterback, then naturally your offense is going to be pretty good. But defensively, it's hard to maintain an elite defense for a long stretch of time. But I think with what the Texans added on to their defensive line, they bring a little bit more depth. You add Reed Blankenship, this defense could be even better this year than what it was last year. And I trust C.J. Stroud to take care of the ball, not put it in harm's way, with him having the ability to have a run game to support him. Great receivers, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. You got some young guys that you drafted. This, to me, looks like the year that the Texans get their first Super Bowl. Zay Flowers, to me, is the most underappreciated wide receiver in the NFL. It's often discussed if Zay Flowers is a true number one wide receiver. He's not your prototypical one. He's not 6'5", 230 pounds. He's not built like Calvin Johnson or Julio Jones. When Zay Flowers was drafted a few years ago by the Baltimore Ravens, he kind of ushered in the new era of smaller receivers in the league. Now you see more guys like Zay Flowers and Tank Dell who are small, but they're elite route runners. They know how to get open. They create a lot of separation. And that's what makes smaller receivers like Zay Flowers capable of being true number one receivers. I feel that Zay Flowers has produced like a true number one wide receiver. Last season, he had over 1,200 yards. He was top 10 in receptions, yards after catch. I mean, if last season wasn't a wide receiver one kind of season, then what is? I mean, how can you not view Zay Flowers as a true number one wide receiver when he does everything that you want your wide receiver one to do? He gets open. Lamar has a high pass rating when he targets Zay Flowers. His pass rating is 115 when he throws Zay Flowers' way. Zay Flowers never gets boxed. There's not too many games where Zay Flowers just can't get open. He's getting clamped up on the line. When you run routes as good as Zay Flowers, you naturally are going to get open a lot more often than the majority of receivers in the league. Because the key to being an elite receiver in the NFL is being able to create separation when you run your routes. And nobody does that better than Zay Flowers. He was 6th in the NFL in separation against man coverage. He was one of the best receivers in one-on-one coverage and man-to-man situations. And also, Zay Flowers, despite the haters and despite how many people don't view him as a wide receiver one, he's the only wide receiver that the Ravens have truly gotten it right with in the draft. Think about the guys that the Ravens have drafted in the first round, that receiver over the past few years, from Brashard Perryman to Hollywood Brown, Zay Flowers is the best one. He's the only receiver that the Ravens have gotten right. And if a guy who's giving you 1,200 receiving yards, he's reliable, he's dynamic after the catch. They call him a joystick for a reason, because when he gets the ball after the catch, he's like a pinball. He's very agile, can change directions on a dime. Everything that I feel an elite wide receiver needs to have to be considered elite, to be a true wide receiver one, Zay Flowers has. It's just he isn't as physically intimidating. He's not as physically imposing as what a Randy Moss, a Julio Jones, or a Calvin Johnson were, but the NFL has changed so much. It's no longer a big man's game on the outside. Most people's prototypical wide receiver one is a Julio Jones, a Calvin Johnson, a Mike Evans, a Brandon Marshall, but the NFL has pivoted now to smaller receivers like Tank Dell, JSN, Zay Flowers, that just know how to get open. And that's the number one thing. Catching the football and getting open. And Zay Flowers does that. So, to me, Zay Flowers is a true number one wide receiver in this league. The Ravens, sure, it would help to get another good wide receiver to pair along Zay Flowers, since that would also benefit him. I'm not saying that Zay Flowers is one of the best receivers in the league, but if you're looking for somebody that you can consider your number one receiver, there's a lot worse that you can do than Zay Flowers. And the numbers support that. 1,200 receiving yards. He was top 10 in yards after catch. So, I mean, if you're top 10 in receptions, yards, and yak, how is that not wide receiver one level production? I think that there's just too much nitpicking going on when it comes to Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is a good receiver. He's a top 15, top 20 receiver in the league. You can win a Super Bowl with Zay Flowers being your best wide receiver. Now, I know that Zay Flowers has had moments when he's had some concentration drops, he's had some bad fumbles, but that's not really a Zay Flowers problem. That's just a Baltimore Ravens problem. If you're going to diminish how good Zay Flowers is because he's had a few drops, he's had some fumbles in the postseason, then the same thing can be said for everybody on the Ravens. Everybody has had an issue taking care of the football, not fumbling it in the postseason. Mark Andrews, he's had fumbles. He's had big drops. Of course, we'll never forget the big drop that he had a few years ago in the division round against the Bills to send the game to overtime. So if you're going to criticize Zay Flowers for the drops and the fumbles and big moments, then you can say the same thing for pretty much every single body else on that Ravens offense. Derrick Henry had some bad fumbles last year. The Ravens just are a team that just implodes in big moments. And that's why they made the decision to fire John Harbaugh and replace him with Jesse Minter. And hopefully with the change and the new head coach that you have in there, you got somebody that's going to be able to get more out of the Ravens in big moments, and you're going to see less mistakes. And Zay Flowers is going to be one of the few beneficiaries of that. I don't think that Zay Flowers is a bad receiver. I think that he's viewed as a average, not wide receiver one kind of guy, since he just has so many bad moments that overshadow his overall body of work. Not everybody can get 200 yards in a season. If you can get 200 yards, you're capable of being a number one wide receiver. And he probably could have had 1,300, 1,400 receiving yards too if Lamar Jackson never got injured. During that stretch when Tyler Huntley came in, like, he still was making some plays, but if Lamar would have played the entirety of this season, Zay Flowers would have produced way better numbers than what he did last year. He's a two-time Pro Bowler. He's had back-to-back 1,000-yard campaigns. If Zay Flowers isn't a wide receiver one, then please tell me what qualifies you to be a number one wide receiver in this league when you have the kind of production that Zay Flowers has. I don't really know how much better you can do than that. I mean, sure, you would love to have a A.J. Brown, a Puka Nacua, and Zay Flowers isn't one of those kinds of guys, but he's producing for the Ravens. And, I mean, say what you want to, Anybody getting over 100-plus targets, catching a good bulk of those, and giving you 1,200 yards in the season is a wide receiver one. And if not a high-end wide receiver one, he definitely is a low-end wide receiver one. If you would have put Zay Flowers on the Buffalo Bills last year, they probably would have won the Super Bowl, because the only thing that they were missing was dynamic receiver on the outside. Zay Flowers would have been the number one receiver on a handful of playoff teams last year, including the Patriots, the Broncos, who both made it to the AFC Championship. So Zay Flowers is a lot better than what he's given credit for. Kind of viewed similarly to how T.Y. Hilton was. Nobody really truly appreciated how good T.Y. Hilton was into the later stages of his career. But he was the Colts' number one wide receiver for a good brick. When Reggie Wayne retired, T.Y. Hilton took over that mantle. So you don't need to be Mike Evans, Julio Jones, or Calvin Johnson to be a good receiver, to be a wide receiver one. I think that the stigma that's hurting Zay Flowers is he's small, so you don't associate smaller receivers with being a true wide receiver one. Hell, there's some people that kind of underrate how good Steve Smith truly was, since at the time when he was in his prime, he also was in the league with Marvin Harrison Jr., Randy Moss, the Brandon Marshalls of the world. But if Steve Smith was built like Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson, I feel more people would have respect for how good he truly was as far as where he ranks all time. Steve Smith is a top 20 receiver. A lot of people argue he's not a top 20 receiver. Some may say he's a top 30 receiver all time. So just because you're not built like Hercules and you don't have the physique of a Calvin Johnson or Julio Jones doesn't mean that you can't be a wide receiver one in this league. The NFL has transitioned from bigger wide receiver ones to now having smaller wide receiver ones that are a lot shiftier, a lot quicker, run routes better, get open a lot faster, because getting open and creating separation are the most important factors of being a good receiver in this league. And that's why Zay Flowers, to me, is a true wide receiver one. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to my guy, Dixon Myers. He says, JT, you got some wild takes. People are not going to take you seriously if you always end up being wrong. How the Chiefs overrated. Don't be that clickbait guy. This shit says Texans and Steelers contenders. Is bro a Raven? This weird gas nut Zay Flowers. I mean, shoot, bro, like, the Texans weren't contenders last year. That defense was just as good as the Seahawks defense. And it took the Texans having, 4 or 5 turnovers to lose to the Patriots? So if you didn't have C.J. Stroud pooping on himself, we easily could have seen the Texans in the AFC Championship. If you listen to the pregame show before the Super Bowl, they had Kyle Shanahan on. Kyle Shanahan said that the Seahawks and the Texans defenses were good enough to win it all as long as the offense or the quarterback didn't F it up. So as long as C.J. Stroud doesn't F it up this year, how can the Texans not be contenders? When you got a defense that good and you improve the offensive line the way that they had, yeah, they're going to be up there. I think that the thought of the Steelers and the Texans being contenders sounds outrageous to some of you people, because we've had the same contenders for the past 5 years. It's been the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and for a one-off 2-year stretch, it was the Cincinnati Bengals. That was about it, but you guys are about to see this year a new crop of teams that hasn't been brought up in the Super Bowl discussion until now start to emerge. The Broncos kind of already are that team. Hell, if you don't think the Steelers or the Texans are contenders, what about the Chargers? All I'm saying is we've seen the same 3 teams be in the championship bubble for a while. There are now other teams starting to emerge. And the Steelers have done such a good job of drafting and hitting on guys in free agency that if Aaron Rodgers comes back and he can build off of what's already a pretty good first season in Pittsburgh with a better supporting cast to throw the football to, hell yeah, the Steelers can definitely be contenders. The defense is going to be good. The coaching could be a lot better. You're finally going to have a damn offense. So I don't see why the Steelers can't be a dark horse Super Bowl contender. I don't see why the Houston Texans can't be Super Bowl contenders when they would have been in the Super Bowl if C.J. Stroud didn't have a shit fest of turnovers. So I don't get how that's a bad take. But you know, it is the off season. Things can change. My opinion can change. But for right now, I think that the Steelers, they're not contenders, but they're dark horse contenders. And the Texans, they're one of the top 3 teams in the AFC right now. Up there with the Bills, the Ravens. I got the Texans right behind them both. So I was very shocked this morning when I logged into Hard Rock, and I got curious and wanted to see how the current Super Bowl odds were looking, who are the favorites to win their division. And what shocked me is that despite the Chiefs coming in 3rd place in the AFC West last year, losing a bunch of starters, a bunch of guys on defense and free agency, Vegas still has the Chiefs as favorites to win the AFC West, even though the Broncos and the Chargers have better rosters than them. And the Chiefs also have the 3rd best odds to win the AFC this year behind the Bills and the Ravens. The Chiefs are being incredibly overrated by Vegas and folks within the national media because you're basing how good you believe the Chiefs are going to be. You're assuming that the Chiefs are going to bounce back and be Super Bowl contenders again based on what they've done in the past, which they've earned that right. The Chiefs have earned the benefit of a doubt. But the AFC is a lot tougher, a lot deeper now than what it was when the Chiefs went to back-to-back Super Bowls and they came close to three-peating. The AFC West was not then what it is now. You have both the Chargers and the Broncos who are good enough to win Super Bowls this year. Then you have emerging contenders like the Texans, the Jaguars. There's a lot more competition for the AFC than what there was 3-4 years ago when the AFC just came down to the Chiefs and either the Bengals, the Ravens, or the Bills. Now the AFC is wide open, and the Chiefs aren't good enough to win how they've won over the past decade. Sure, you got Patrick Mahomes, an all-time great, and he's able to help you overcome the limitations that you may have if your defense isn't as good, your receivers aren't as great, but you can't win that way anymore. The Chiefs can't win simply relying on Patrick Mahomes' magic. Oh, our receivers aren't that great. We got Tyquan Thornton. We can still win with him being that receiver since we have Mahomes and Andy Reid. That no longer is going to fly when you're going up against much better teams that have more star power than what you have. When the Chiefs got throttled by the Eagles in the Super Bowl, that was the sign of how different the NFL has become. Because at one point when the Chiefs first came in with Mahomes and Andy Reid, sure, their teams weren't that stacked, and then eventually they had super good teams. But once they got rid of Tyreek Hill, they got a little bit overconfident. They got a little bit too complacent. They kept believing that as long as we got Mahomes and Andy Reid, everybody else can be replaceable. And they learned very quickly when the rest of the teams in your division get it right at head coach, and they also start bringing in some talented players, then that advantage that you had at quarterback goes out the window. Justin Herbert isn't better than Patrick Mahomes, but he's good enough to win a Super Bowl if you give him a good team, which the Chargers have. He has a good OC in Mike McDaniel. He's going to have a healthy offensive line this year, and that's the only thing that really held the Chargers back last season was the offensive line. The offensive line is going to be fully healthy, so the Chargers could win it all this year. The Broncos, they just traded for Jalen Waddle. Right now, the Chiefs' roster is average, and depending on what the Raiders do from this point on until the end of the draft, the Chiefs could be the worst team in the AFC West by the time this season kicks off from a talent standpoint. The Chiefs aren't going to be able to bounce back to Super Bowl contenders overnight with the average roster. They have one of the worst rosters in the entire AFC. They have no pass rush. They have no cornerbacks. And sure, the draft is a few weeks away, but you're not going to be able to fill every hole, fix every need with one draft class. And the Chiefs haven't been good at drafting anyway. They haven't had a good draft class since they drafted Trent McDuffie 3-4 years ago. The Chiefs rebuild is not going to be a simple one-off season thing. It's going to take at least 2 off seasons for the Chiefs to have a team that's talented enough to be a Super Bowl contender again. Now, I'm not saying that the Chiefs dynasty is over. The Chiefs, I guarantee, are going to win at least 2 more Super Bowls before Patrick Mahomes hangs it up. But they won't come close to getting another one this year. The Chiefs can't win the AFC with just having Patrick Mahomes magic and asking him to continue to elevate an average roster with what's going to be a weak defense. We know that Steve Spagnuolo is the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. If they put coordinators in the Hall of Fame, Steve Spagnuolo would be a first ballot defensive coordinator. But even great coaches need to have great players. And the Chiefs don't have a lot of great players right now. This is the 3rd best team in the AFC West. The Ravens and the Bills, them hiring new head coaches that are a lot younger with fresh perspectives, ideas, could be what finally gets one of those franchises back over the hump. And then the Jags and the Texans, they're coming. So there's a lot more competition for the AFC right now than what there was 2-3 years ago when the Chiefs were running amok on the AFC. Like right now, with the state of the Chiefs roster, they aren't anywhere close to me good enough to win it all. Now, I know that they've won and overachieved in the past with rosters that weren't that good, but as I said earlier, this is an entirely different AFC. Even your division is a lot different, a lot better, a lot tougher. You found that out last year. Remember last season when it was a hot take to predict anybody but Kansas City winning the AFC West? Oh, we won this division every year. You've been saying this for the last 10 decades that somebody else is going to win the AFC West. And it's never happened. Well, it happened last year. So if you got blown out by the Eagles in the Super Bowl with them having a way better team than you, and then you end up finishing 3rd in your division, then that's a sign that you're not talented enough to win another Super Bowl right now. And until the Chiefs end up having a top 5 roster from a talent standpoint, they're not going to come close to winning another Super Bowl again. Because, yes, having an elite quarterback can help you overcome certain positions that you lack at, and he can elevate certain parts of the team, like what happened in that Super Bowl against the Eagles. If you're just going up against an outright better team, then there's nothing you can do. Same thing happened to you in 2020 when you went up against the Bucs. You just outright lost to the better team, and you got dominated. And you're going to see a lot more teams play the Chiefs in the playoffs, and the Chiefs not really be that competitive. Like, if the Chiefs were to play the Texans right now, it would look really ugly. Because not only is the Texans defense going to box the Chiefs offense, but defensively, like, would the Chiefs defense even get a few stops? I mean, you can't even name 2-3 guys on that defense right now outside of Chris Jones. You just can't continue to dominate the AFC the same way you did a few years ago, because the NFL always changes, and you have to be able to change with it. And the Chiefs have to change their philosophy. Sure, a few years ago, Mahomes was good enough to win you it all, regardless of who he was throwing to. Now it isn't anymore. The same thing happened to Tom Brady. Why do you think he left the Patriots? He told Bill Belichick, look, if you're not going to pay me, at least use the money that you're not going to pay me to get some more weapons for me to throw the football to. And Bill Belichick said, you know, I'm going to get who I want to get, Brady. And if you got a problem with it, you can go kick rocks. So you know what Brady did? He said, all right, I feel you, Bill. I hear you. I'm going to go to Tampa, a team that actually has some good receivers, a good offensive line, some playmakers that I can work with at my age. And what did Tom Brady do? He won it all. You can't win in today's NFL by just saying, I got a great quarterback and a great head coach. That's enough to get me over the hump. It's not. Look at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills keep convincing themselves that they've been good enough to win it all. And certain years they have had teams that were good enough to win the Lombardi. But the team they had last year was nowhere as good as the Bills team that you saw losing 13 seconds to Kansas City. the AFC is just too competitive right now, too loaded with great teams to think that the Chiefs are going to be able to win it all again and be contenders out of nowhere with Mahomes carrying an average defense, an average group of receivers. Sure, you got Kenneth Walker. He's going to be a good big playmaker for you, but you need a lot more. The Chargers have a lot more firepower than you. The Broncos have a lot more firepower than you. You got to catch up. And the Chiefs, they're not doing that. They're further falling more behind. Shout out to my guy, Hanging Iron 86. He says, JT, hey, man. He says, don't forget Seahawks signed Jake Bobo, 2 years, $4.5 million contract, cheap, but keeping him in the system. Yeah, like, I saw that the Jaguars tried to sign Jake Bobo, but I believe he's a restricted free agent. So any offer that gets made, the Seahawks could match it, and they ended up matching the Jaguars' offer. So he still is a Seahawk. So I got one more thing before we get up on out of here, man. So during this time, well, let me rephrase that. So in the build-up to the NFL draft, oftentimes you have guys who watch so much film and critique these prospects so much that they develop something called prospect fatigue. Now, what prospect fatigue is that if you talk about a top prospect long enough and you watch enough film, despite how good of a prospect he may be, you eventually will get fatigued enough to where you start finding a lot of holes in his game that you nitpick, and it makes you become a lot lower on that player than what you were before. And you end up overthinking it. And a lot of people are overthinking it with Fernando Mendoza. Earlier today, our guy, Dan Orlovsky, love me some Dan Orlovsky. Very good analysis. I believe that he's one of the best peer analysis or one of the best peer analysts on ESPN when it comes to covering the NFL. Unfortunately, every good analyst, such as Dan Orlovsky, has a few very bad takes. And Dan Orlovsky dropped the worst take of this draft season when he said that Ty Simpson was QB1 in this year's draft over Fernando Mendoza. And the thing with Fernando Mendoza that people are always quick to throw in your face is, well, if you put Fernando Mendoza in next year's quarterback class, he wouldn't be QB1 or even QB2. If you put Fernando Mendoza in the 2024 quarterback class, he wouldn't have gone over Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or even Drake May. Look, it's not about trying to define the next Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. Everybody seems to be so misguided from how good Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have been that they think that you need a Josh Allen or Lamar at quarterback to win a Super Bowl when neither one of those guys have rings. Sam Darnold just won a freaking Super Bowl. Brock Purdy has been to a Super Bowl. So you don't need an alien at quarterback to win it all. A guy like a Fernando Mendoza, who has the ceiling of a Kirk Cousins, a more athletic version of Dak Prescott, is worthy of being the first overall pick at quarterback because he has a high floor and a moderate ceiling. He's a safe quarterback. He has a very low chance of being a bust and a very high chance of giving you top 15 quarterback play or better. And you can win a Super Bowl with that. You have a very low chance of hitting on quarterback in the first round as it already is. You have a 20% chance of drafting a starting quarterback in the first round that can last 10 years. That's very low. So if you're telling me that Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott, when they came out of the draft and their respective draft classes were going to play 10 plus years in the league and do it at a top 15 or better level, yeah, that's worthy of being a first round pick. I don't think enough fans and enough people in the national media realize how difficult it is to get it right at quarterback in the first round. Great quarterbacks don't grow on trees. And when you have a quarterback class as weak as this one, you don't waste a first round pick on a guy like a Ty Simpson Ty Simpson is Mac Jones with a little bit more spice. He's the same player as Mac Jones, does have a great arm, struggles throwing the deep ball, gets easily rattled when things break down, but he plays very well within structure. But he is a lot more athletic than Mac Jones, which is why he's Mac Jones with just a little bit more salt. But the same problem with Mac Jones for why he never should have been a first-round pick, it's the same problem with Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, his ceiling is a lot lower than Fernando Mendoza. Because from the physical attribute standpoint of this, Fernando Mendoza is a far better quarterback prospect than Ty Simpson. A stronger arm, he is way bigger, more athletic. And Dan Orlovsky, one of the key points he made for why Ty Simpson was QB1 over Fernando Mendoza is that there were more games when Ty Simpson looked like the best player on the field than Fernando Mendoza did. But I have to disagree with that. Because when Indiana beat Miami in the national championship, Fernando Mendoza was the best player on the field in that game. He was the best player on the field in every single one of Indiana's postseason games this year. And when it comes to drafting a quarterback in the first round, I don't need you to be the best prospect all the time. I just need you to be able to execute the offense, be able to execute the short, intermediate passing game very well, take care of the football, and be able to be a good leader. And Fernando Mendoza checks all of those boxes. Fernando Mendoza is a lot more like Andrew Luck than he is the Jared Goff or Matt Ryan with more mobility, because those have been common comparisons, common comps for Fernando Mendoza. But Fernando Mendoza, what you're getting out of him if you take him first overall, that being the Raiders, is that you're getting a 10-year starting quarterback for you. Most teams draft quarterbacks in the first round that don't even start no longer than 3 years for them. So if you're telling me that Fernando Mendoza is going to give me top 15 or better quarterback play for 10 plus years, yeah, I'm willing to take that first overall, even if there are guys that might have more upside than him. And I don't even think that Ty Simpson is even better than Carson Beck. Ty Simpson, I rarely saw this dude complete a deep ball. And let's not make it seem like Fernando Mendoza's team was way better than Alabama's. Alabama still recruits at a top 3 level every single year. Alabama had one of the 5 most talented teams entering last college football season from a team talent composite ranking. You're only saying that Indiana is the better team now because of the result of the season. But if you would have told me that Indiana was going to be a better team than Alabama before the start of last season, I would have looked at you crazy. And a bunch of other people would have looked at you crazy. But revisionist history, hindsight is 2020. When you're at a school like Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, you're always going to be playing with some of the best talent in America. Ty Simpson didn't carry Alabama because they were a bad team. He carried Alabama because the head coach that he played for, Kellen DeBoer, is a pass-happy coach. So he loves to throw the football. He doesn't put a lot of emphasis on running the football. This was the same guy who got Michael Penix drafted in the top 10 and helped Michael Penix finish as a Heisman finalist. So it's more so the scheme than it is Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson is not that good. If you are drafting Ty Simpson in the first round of the draft this year, you are making the same mistake that the Pittsburgh Steelers made when they drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round a few years ago. Because it's this notion that if you're a quarterback-needy team and you need a quarterback, you got to be desperate for one to the point that you overdraft one in the weak quarterback class. Decisions that are made out of desperation never end up being the right decisions. When the Steelers got desperate and they drafted Kenny Pickett because you had to draft a quarterback in a weak class, they got asked out. QB-needy teams, even if they do need a quarterback, they don't have to settle for low-hanging fruit just because they got to have one. You don't got to have a quarterback right now, especially when next year's quarterback class looks a lot more promising than this one. No QB needy team has to take a quarterback high in the first round for the sake of it. Or you end up being like the Minnesota Vikings. You get a J.J. McCarthy or you get an Anthony Richardson. It makes a lot more sense to just draft quarterbacks in solid QB classes than to just reach for ones in a weak QB class for the sake of, we need a QB, so let's just draft one. Now, you can still have some diamonds in the rough in a very bad QB class like last year. Last year's quarterback class wasn't really viewed in that high of a regard, but you still had some gems like Jackson Dart was a lot better than what most people expected. Tyler Shuck was a lot better than what nearly everybody expected, but a handful of people. So occasionally you can strike some oil. You can find a Brock Purdy late, but that's not that often. So taking Ty Simpson over Fernando Mendoza to me is just a very idiotic decision. And it's a take that I strongly disagree with Dan Orlovsky with. And I feel the only reason he has this take is simply due to prospect fatigue. He's watched so much film on Fernando Mendoza that he has to find some weaknesses in his game. Fernando Mendoza is as solid as what you can be for a quarterback prospect. He's not elite at anything, but he's very good at a lot of different things. He has a strong arm, not an elite arm, but a strong enough arm that he can make all the necessary throws that you need to be successful in the NFL. He throws a way better deep ball than Ty Simpson. He has some of the best ball placement that I've seen out of any quarterback prospect as of recently. And he understands defenses both pre and post snap. Have you ever listened to Fernando Mendoza talk football? Have you just listened to Fernando Mendoza just talk? Does this sound like a guy who is going to fail? Does this not sound like an Andrew Luck kind of quarterback? Like, literally, you listen to Fernando Mendoza's post-game interviews. Oh, man, we were willing to die for it. We were going to leave it all out there. Like, I'm willing to die for my team. Like, Fernando Mendoza on 4th and long ran a quarterback draw and ran the defense and scored a touchdown. Don't tell me about Fernando Mendoza does have this, Fernando Mendoza does have that. Sure, he's not elite at anything, but he's rock solid at everything that you need to be a solid quarterback in this league. And that's why the Raiders are going to take him first overall, and he's going to be successful. Because sometimes people just overthink it with quarterbacks. You're not going to find Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen growing on trees. You're not going to find Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. Sometimes you got to take what you can get. And if you can get a 10-year starter in this league, that's worth being a first-round pick. People are overthinking it with Fernando Mendoza. But that's all I have for this episode. I appreciate all you guys for tapping in. Shout out to Hanging Iron 86. Shout out to 13 Seconds. Shout out to Dixon Maya. Shout out to Kazir Gordon. Shout out to everybody that tapped in for tonight's episode. Before you leave up on out of here, give JT Sports a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, the links are down in the description down below. Follow us on Instagram, X, TikTok, at JT Sports _ for some bonus content. And lastly, look, man, if you're trying to talk football 24/7, hit the link in the description and join the JT Sports Discord server. Listen, you might catch me at 4 a.m. texting in a group chat about ball. So if you're just trying to be in a community that just is up talking football at any time of the day, join our Discord. The link is down in the description.